Good evening, everyone. I'm Michelle Leifer. I'm the director of the USDAN Institute for Animal Health Education at the Schwarzman Animal Medical Center. Along with my colleague, Kimberly Young, I'd like to thank you for joining us for tonight's event, How to Make Your Cat Happy with Dr. Mikel Delgado. Tonight's event will be recorded, and we'll send out a link tomorrow in case you miss anything or would like to share it with a friend. We'll be taking questions via chat, and we'll be sure to save some time at the end of tonight's event to answer as many of your questions as possible. I just want to take a quick moment to mention an upcoming event. On Wednesday, February 15th at 6 p.m., we will host Dental Care Basics for Dogs and Cats with AMC's Dr. Ada Toe. You can register for that event on our website, amcny.org/events. We'll also have that link in our newsletter that goes out tomorrow night. And now I am so thrilled to introduce tonight's featured speaker. Dr. Mikel Delgado is a certified applied animal behaviorist and certified cat behavior consultant who has been working with cats professionally for more than 20 years. Dr. Delgado completed her PhD in animal behavior and cognition at UC Berkeley and did postdoctoral research at the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine. She worked as a cat behavior specialist at the San Francisco SPCA for 8 years before co-founding Feline Minds, where she offers assistance for cat owners, animal shelters, and corporations. Dr. Delgado co-authored the 2017 book Total Cat Mojo with Jackson Galaxy, and she's the author of the forthcoming book Play with Your Cat, which is due out next year. Dr. Delgado lives in Sacramento with her boyfriend and their 3 rescue cats, Coriander, Ruby, and Professor Scribbles. And we are so happy to have her with us to lead tonight's event. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mikel Delgado.
Thank you so much. Professor Scribbles has decided to make an appearance, so hopefully she will not disrupt my presentation. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited to be chatting with you about one of my favorite topics, and I see a couple of familiar faces in the audience, so thanks for being here. I'm going to share my screen. You know, there's always like that Zoom transition, so just give me a second to get my PowerPoint up, and let's see. You can let me know if that looks good, Michelle. We good to go? Awesome. Okay, so again, thanks. So I'm going to talk about making your cat happy, basically reviewing some of the science and why we make the recommendations we do about caring for our cats. And I try to keep my goals pretty modest when I give a talk, because I know that most of you are cat lovers. Cat lovers tend to do as much as they can to learn more about their cats. But, you know, I would love if everyone who comes to this talk takes away one new thing that you want to try with your cat, or one new piece of information, something you didn't know about cats before. So that's my goal. I hope to achieve it. And if I don't, you can always ask me a question and try to stump me at the end. So I like to start off by just talking about who cats are, because, you know, it seems like such a basic question. I've got a cat in my lap right now. I see some other people have their cats in their laps right now. And who are cats? They're these fuzzy little creatures that hang out with us and share our homes, and they're pretty fantastic. But if we look at their natural history, we can see some very interesting and cool things. And one of those things is just what's happened to cats during the process of domestication. So how have cats evolved and ended up with us, and what does that look like? So let's start with these photos. I think all of these look like cats you might encounter on a street, outside, maybe a friend's house. But what's really cool is that only one of these cats is a cat. So only one of these cats is the same species as our pet. And you can take a guess, I'll give you a few seconds, as to which of these cats is a house cat. And the answer is the one in the middle. So the one on the left is the European wildcat. That's one of cats' closest relatives, and they're actually endangered by feral cats interbreeding with them in the UK. On the right-hand side, we have the African wildcat. That is the cat's closest relative, closest to their ancestral species. But what I hope you're taking away from this, so the cat in the middle is Felis silvestris catus. That is the domesticated cat, also with origins in the Middle East and Egypt, is that they look really alike and you could mistake any of these cats for a domestic cat if you did not look carefully. And what this tells us is that during the process of evolution and domestication, cats have stayed very similar in appearance to their wild relatives. And what we also know is that since domestication, they've behaved very similarly to their wildest and closest relatives. So we see very little selection for physical characteristics. And so what I mean by that is that as we've selected cats to be our companions, we have not changed them physically, certainly not to the extent as we have dogs. So if you think about the full range of dogs, you can have a Chihuahua, you can have a Great Dane. Those are both dogs, and they've been heavily selected on for particular characteristics, whether it's being very small or very large. We don't see that variety in cats. And I'm not saying that all cats look the same, because of course we do have some breeds of cats that do have maybe a more extreme look, like the Siamese or the Persian cats. But overall, cats have not changed physically very much. We have not asked them to change physically very much. And when you actually look at the control of cat breeding, we don't control much of their breeding. So 97% of cats are feral or random bred, meaning they choose their own mates. When you have a purebred cat, the human is intervening and deciding this cat's going to mate with this cat. And we're just not doing that very much with cats. Purebred cats make up a very small percentage of the cat population. We also know that there's a lot of intermixing with wild populations. So as I mentioned, feral cats in the UK do breed with European wildcats, and that's a problem for the European wildcats, but it also points to the closeness between these two species. And when we look at genetic changes, compared to dogs, we just don't see the same level of genetic changes in domestic cats from their wild counterparts compared to what we see in dogs and their ancestral species. What I think is most interesting and important is the fact that cats can survive without humans. Cats thrive on every continent, whether or not they receive human support. And as a result, what we can say is when we look at domestication and we look at the evolution of cats, is that very little has changed behaviorally from the cat you have on your lap and that wild cat that's living in the plains of various Eastern African areas. So to me, as a cat owner, I appreciate that kind of wildness, and I think you have to kind of accept there's a certain amount of mystery and intrigue. But from a behavioral perspective, we also have to kind of recognize what that means for how we live with cats. And I like this list of, these are all what we would consider normal, healthy, typical feline behaviors. Now, you might notice that some of these things are very unpleasant to humans or cause conflict with humans. And certainly as a behavior consultant, a lot of these things on this list, people come to me with complaints because their cat does these, but these are perfectly natural behaviors. Cats hunt alone, they scratch naturally, they groom, they engage in self-protective behaviors that we label aggression, but biting and scratching occurs for a reason. Cats naturally hide to protect themselves. They eat alone, they like to climb, they like warmth, they naturally eliminate in a clean, loose substrate that hopefully we provide for them in our home. They mark their territory in different ways. And that, again, is a natural behavior. If it's urine marking, man, we don't like that. But for cats, that is a natural behavior that thankfully they don't do as much when we spay and neuter them. Cats are naturally active at dawn and dusk. A lot of people think cats are nocturnal, but they're actually what we call crepuscular. And that's being active when their prey is active, which is when the sun goes down and when the sun comes up. And you might see some zoomies then. And of course, cats use vocalizations to communicate with one another. So just giving an overview, these are things that are good for cats to be doing. If cats do these things, it's usually a sign of good health. And again, sometimes these things happen under situations of conflict, but these are things that we typically need to provide outlets for. Another thing that comes up a lot is whether or not cats are loners. Many of you have probably heard that cats are solitary species, antisocial, and it's a lot more complicated than that. Cats are socially flexible, so they can live alone, they can survive alone, but they can also live with several other cats. And a lot of that depends on circumstance. So we know when we observe feral colonies of cats that they naturally form groupings around related females and their offspring. So their colonies are what we call matrilineal. And that's how cats would naturally group if humans don't do too much interfering. But what we also know is that those groupings are highly dependent on the resources in the environment. So is there shelter? Are there plenty of mice or other sources of food to go around? And those cats also have the choice to disperse if they want, or to congregate if they want. Whereas in our homes, we're dictating how many cats there are and what is the density of the population in our home. And that's sometimes where we see conflict. We also know that cats are, their ability to live with other cats is probably influenced by some of the things we've selected for during domestication. And we're pretty sure that we've selected for cats that are much more social than their closest relatives. Like we know the African wildcat is a very solitary species, whereas we know cats, like I said, can be social. And certainly if a cat is reared with other cats from a young age, they have a much better chance of being friendly towards other cats later. What's also cool is that cats' sociality is not just universal. Like they can have friends. So just like, you know, I think we tend to think like, oh, well, my cat liked the last cat he lived with, so why doesn't he like the new cat? Well, cats are picky. Just like you don't like every person you meet, you're not best friends with every person you meet. Cats have what we call preferred associates. That's the scientific term for friends. And basically that just means that they spend more time than would be expected by chance with individual cats. And if you have multiple cats, you might notice that you have some groupings of cats that are much closer. They're more likely to groom each other or play together or sleep together than other cats in your home. And those are their friends, their preferred associates. We also know that cats are very susceptible to stress. This is a really important thing to know about cats. We talk a lot about cats being these, predators or killers, but they're also prey animals. They're in the middle of the food chain. They're not a top predator, they're a mesopredator. And what that means is that they always have to kind of be on the lookout for danger. And that's kind of where we get this scaredy cat. We have a cat that's really trying to protect themselves, avoid making themselves vulnerable. Maybe they verify before trusting. And there's been a lot of research also showing that this kind of susceptibility leads us to having an animal, a pet that is very sensitive to changes in their environment. And in fact, my friend Judy Stella and my mentor, Dr. Tony Buffington, did some research looking at cats' responses to stressors in the environment. These were cats that were being housed in a colony in a laboratory, and they were exposed to unexpected events. And let me tell you what the unexpected events were. Basically, they changed who fed the cats on a daily basis and what time the cats were fed. Not like that extreme of a stressor for what most people would consider, because when you go out of town and you have a cat sitter, you have a different person feeding your cat, and they're probably feeding them at a slightly different time. Well, it turns out that something that seems so trivial to us was a big deal for the cats. And these were perfectly healthy cats, but they started showing what we call sickness behaviors. And what that means is that there was no medical cause for their behavior, but they were vomiting, they were having diarrhea, they stopped eating, they stopped using the litter box. So they were showing signs of illness, even though there was no physical cause for the illness. It was caused by stress. And so, although I don't want to, portray cats as like delicate snowflakes, they are kind of delicate, and they really thrive off of routine and knowing when they can expect things. And when we change that routine too much, it can be a stressor, and it can actually cause physical problems. As a result, we try to make our environments optimal for our cats. And what I use as a model is the 5 pillars of a healthy feline environment. These 5 pillars were created by a consortium of cat behavior experts about a decade ago, actually, and they still hold up very well. So I'm going to go through them in detail. But the concept behind this is really setting up an environment for your cats where they can thrive. And the thing that has changed a lot in our thinking is you probably have heard the word environmental, or the term environmental enrichment. We talk about enrichment a lot. And I think what gets into people's mind with enrichment is this idea that you add something to the environment and it's supposed to make your cat happier, right? It doesn't necessarily specify what that something is. You just put something in there, a new toy or a new bed, and hope that it makes your cat's life better. And now the thinking is really like our cats have environmental needs, and those needs are just as important as food and water. So having a good place to scratch and a place to climb and a place to hide, these are essentials. These are things your cats need. They're not optional. And really our goal is to set up the environment so that your cat is thriving and to reduce the chance of them being stressed and reduce the chance of them having behavior problems. You really don't want to wait until you have a problem, because I can tell you it's much easier to prevent behavior problems than solve them. And this is coming from someone who spends a lot of time trying to help people solve problems. A lot of times, we all wish that they had been proactive instead of reactive. So I always encourage people to really think about your cat's environmental needs and do everything you can to set up your cat's environment to make them happy. So let's look at what those 5 pillars are. So I'm just going to run through these real quick, and then we're going to go through each one in detail. So the 5 pillars are safety, multiple and separated resources, opportunities for play or predatory behavior, consistent social interactions, and respecting the feline nose. So let's break those down. The first pillar is safety. All cats need an option to hide if they want to. And I think, so there was this really cool study in an animal shelter where it's very controversial. A lot of shelters don't want to give cats a place to hide because the cats will hide in them. And the shelter workers are afraid that the cats won't be seen and they won't get adopted because they'll be hiding in a box all the time. But the reality is that when you provide a cat with a hiding box, they actually recover from the stress of being in a shelter much faster. So in the study, half the cats got a box, the other half of the cats did not get a box. The cats who got a box definitely hid in it. The cats who didn't get a hiding box still tried to hide. So since they didn't have a box, what they tended to do was either crouch in their litter box or crouch in the tiny space between their litter box and the wall of the cage. That behavior is also not appealing to adopters, it turns out. And the cats who had the hiding box actually recuperated from being stressed much faster. They came out of hiding and were adopted faster. So what this tells us is that we can't stop cats from hiding if they want to, and we shouldn't try to stop them. So if you have a cat who runs under the bed when you have guests or when the doorbell rings, you should not try to pull your cat out of hiding or stop them from being able to hide. What you should do is make sure they have plenty of places to hide that are acceptable. So under the bed should not be their primary hiding space. They should have some other choices. And that can be anything from, a cubby, a cardboard box, a tunnel, a bed with a cover. You can get very creative and come up with some really comfortable spots for your cat to hide. But the main takeaway is that if they're frightened, hiding makes them feel safe, and you should not stop them from hiding. You should not pull them out from hiding. You can certainly, talk to them, encourage them to come out of hiding for treats, but it really should be of their own volition. And if there are certain things in the environment that are making your cat hide a lot, then I would recommend talking to your veterinarian or behavior professional and see if there's some other things that can be done to help your cat cope with those stressors, or if you can eliminate or reduce those stressors so that your cat doesn't feel compelled to hide in the first place. But we do want to make sure that our cat has safe sleeping and resting areas. We also can turn the cat carrier into a safe space. And whenever I tell people this, so many people look at me like I'm, what is she thinking? When we go to the closet to get the carrier out, the cat runs and hides under the bed, right? So we're back to the bed as the optimal hiding spot. So you can't just tell your cat hey, this carrier is a great place to hide. You have to turn it into a fun and safe space for them. If your cat's really traumatized by your current carrier, you might have to start fresh with a new carrier. Maybe it's a slightly different style, but ideally it's some kind of hard-sided carrier with a top opening. Sleepy Pod also makes a great carrier that's a bed that you can put a top on, and that's another option. And you can put treats in it, you can put bedding in it, you can put catnip or toys in it. And you should leave it out all the time. It basically should become part of your furniture, not something that only comes out of the closet when it's time to go to the vet, because your cat will learn pretty quickly that when you go to that closet and they hear the rattle of that carrier, they're going to get some vaccinations, so that's not fun. So you really want it to be something that's just part of the cat's environment. And in fact, there was research that showed that training your cat to love the carrier did make the cat less likely to vocalize on the car ride. The vet exam was much less stressful for vet, cat, and owner alike. And so their method of training the cats to love their carriers was not complicated. Basically, over the course of 6 weeks, they gave the cat treats in the carrier, and they gradually acted like the cat was going to the vet without taking the cat to the vet. So they put the treats in the carrier with the top off, and then after a few days, when the cat was going in the carrier and laying on the bedding and eating the treats, they put the top back on, and then the cat would do the same thing, get treats, get food, see it as a place to lay. And then they would close the door for a few seconds. Then maybe the next day they'd put the carrier in the car. Then maybe the next day they'd put the carrier in the car and turn on the car. And then maybe they go back inside. And then the next day they're going to go on a short ride, right? So they didn't just rush the process. They took that 6-week period. But if you think about how long your cat's going to live, and how many times they might potentially have to go to the vet, especially when they get older, that 6-week investment in training for a few minutes a day could be very useful for the cat's entire lifetime. So the moral of the story is, if we properly introduce the carrier and make it a place that the cat associates with fun and treats, it doesn't have to be this bad. This was my cat Beanie. This was actually shortly after she'd been at the vet for several hours seeing a specialist. So when we got home, she came out, she had a snack, and then she went back into her carrier for a nap. So it doesn't mean that going to the vet is going to like poison the carrier forever. If you set it up correctly, your cat will just associate it with an occasional sad experience, but hopefully not a terrible one. And then they see it as a bed that they can go to for comfort later. Cats also love vertical space. I'm a big fan. I'm always pushing people to get bigger cat trees, higher cat shelves. Cats really love being able to see what's going on from up high. And what I think is great about cat trees is that they allow cats to share space. If you look at those 2 cats on the right, they are literally sharing the same square footage. Like, we're very focused on kind of that 2-dimensional space and how many square feet our homes have. And cats really think in 3 dimensions. And so you can really increase your territory. A lot of times people say like, oh, my apartment's too small for a cat tree. And I'm like, no, you need a cat tree because your apartment's small. You need to go up. And this really allows you to expand your territory and make room for more cats to coexist peacefully. It does, allow cats to travel through space safely. So if you have dogs or kids, having shelving and cat trees can allow your cat to kind of hop from one space to the other and avoid being face to face with that toddler or dog. And having vertical space in your house may prevent health problems. There was research in South Korea where this was survey-based research, so it's just correlations, but what they found is that cat owners who reported providing vertical space for their cats that the cats used also had lower instances of lower urinary tract disease in their cats. So that is probably related indirectly to stress. So what we see is that cats that do have vertical space, regardless of other cats in the home, are going to have less stress, and that's going to reduce the incidence of what's called feline idiopathic cystitis, which is a stress-related urinary tract disease. So do it for their health. Go big. I also love like a cat tree that's like 6 foot plus. Okay, that's pillar 1. So we talked about safety and territory. Now we're going to talk about multiple and separated resources. I've done a fair share of home consultations, and the cat owner is very proud that they have a cat corner. The cat's litter box, food and water, scratch post, and toys are all on beds, are all kind of in one space. It's the cat's corner, and they really are excited to show it to me. And then I have to break it to them that they really should be splitting that stuff up. Just like we don't want to eat in our bathroom, we don't want to sleep in our bathroom, our cats don't want to eat or sleep in their bathroom either. So the first rule is like those things should be several feet apart. But the other thing that's really important is especially when you have multiple cats, but even if you have just one cat, is that you want to provide your cat with choices. And that means providing them with multiple copies of these important resources. So you want to have multiple litter boxes. The magic number that you may have heard is n+1, meaning the number of cats you have plus 1. So if you have 2 cats, you should have 3 litter boxes. If you have 5 cats, you should have 6 litter boxes. If you have 15 cats, you should have 16 litter boxes in a very large house. And the same is true of their other important necessities. So you should have multiple feeding stations, you should have multiple scratching posts, multiple beds, etc. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why. And I always encourage people to do a little exercise. And I'm going to start with sharing. So I'm doing the exercise myself. So we're going to walk through and look at my environment and how I provide for my cats. And hopefully it will give you a little insight, but if you have thoughts or it gives you any inspiration for your own home, or maybe you have some suggestions for me, I'm open. So I have all my clients do this for me as well, because first thing I want to do is look at the layout of their home, especially now that I'm not doing as many home visits due to the pandemic, but I want to see what kind of resources they provide for their cats and where and how many. So this is my home. It's a pretty small house. We have 3 cats. And first I have people show me where your litter boxes are. So we've got, I have 2 litter boxes in my living room. I do live with my litter boxes. I clean them twice a day. I keep them very, very clean. And, a lot of people don't want to have a litter box in their living room. I think it can be done. I think it can often be a good place for a litter box, but so this is so we've got 2 in our living room in opposite corners. We've got 1 in one of our bathrooms and then 1 in a back closet. So I've got 3 cats, 4 litter boxes. Then I want to know, where do you feed and water your cats? So the X's are where my cats are fed. So I have 2 Sure Feed feeders. Those are microchip activated feeders. There's one in our music room and one in the office where I am right now. And then we have 2 areas where we have multiple food puzzles in our living room. And then the blue squares with the little waves in them, those are the water fountains. I probably should have another water fountain at least. So, you can ding me there. Even the cat behaviorist is not perfect, but we do have 2 fountains. So the cats have choices. And then I have people tell me, where are your cat beds and your scratching posts and your cat trees? So boom. The bold circles are our cat trees. So we have 4 of them. So I don't know if you can see the cursor on here, but we've got 2 cat trees in the front window. We've got one against our back sliding glass doors, which lead to our catio. We're very lucky to have a catio. So our cats do get outside time as well. And then we have a cat tree. You can see it behind me on my desk. We have some of these gray lines are cat shelving, which is still kind of in progress. These squares are scratching posts. So we have 3 3-foot scratching posts with little scoop beds on the top against the back of our couch, which is really great in preventing our cats from doing any furniture scratching. And then we have another scratching post here in the office. And then we have 2, these little rectangles with hash marks are scratch pads in our bedroom. And then all of these B's with purple circles, those are cat beds. So these are the primary cat beds. We have 8 of them. 4 of them are heated, which I highly recommend. But, basically you can look at this and say, maybe some of you are like, yeah, she's a crazy cat lady. Or maybe you're like, oh, cool. Like she has stuff for her cats in almost every room. Really, the major exception is the kitchen. We have a galley kitchen, so it's barely big enough for humans, much less cats. So we don't have a lot of cat stuff. We don't have really any cat stuff in there. But what hopefully you take away from this is that our cats live in our house. They have stuff in every room. The territory is theirs as much as it is ours. So we coexist with our cats, and I think they're pretty happy about it, but they also have easy access to every resource they need, regardless if another cat is blocking their way, or if they're in the back of the house and they need to go to the bathroom, or if they're in the front of the house and need to go to the bathroom, or if they're hungry or thirsty. Those things are very accessible to them. And again, regardless of if there's another cat that maybe they have conflict with, a cat can only guard one litter box if the litter boxes are all in different places, right? They can't guard all 4 at once. So we really just want to give our cats the option. It sounds a little weird because I think humans are very focused on sharing, but for cats, really time sharing and avoidance are really effective strategies for them in coexisting peacefully. And so we just really can encourage our cats to coexist with one another by separating some of this stuff and letting them have choices. It's all about choice for cats. And then talking more about the resources. So when we look at their feeding style, cats naturally are not sharers. And this, again, is where anthropomorphism can kind of lead us astray, because humans eat as a group. If I came to your house for dinner and sat in the other room and ate, it would be very strange. But for cats, they're not social eaters. They hunt tiny mice that they don't share with one another, and they don't naturally eat together. And so it's really important to, even if your cats get along, my 3 cats are sisters, and I would not ask them to eat side by side. You want to have those multiple separated food and water stations. So again, they have the choice. If they want to eat from the same dish, they can, but they don't have to eat together if they don't want to. And what I've seen in some of my research at UC Davis is that there is a lot of stress around the food dish when cats are forced to share or eat side by side. Fighting. Some cats will just wait to eat, or they'll eat really fast because they're anxious about being so close to a cat. That's also probably going to eat all the food really fast and try to eat their food too. So there's lots of reasons to separate their food dishes from one another. And also I always recommend that people keep in mind that cats naturally eat multiple small meals a day. If they were hunting, they would hunt 8 to 10 mice a day to survive. So that's kind of what the number of meals you ideally would provide. No, most of us are not going to feed our cats 8 times a day, but that is kind of why you see a lot of grazing behavior in cats. Just touching on the litter box, this is one of my litter boxes. So I use modified storage bins for all of my litter boxes. So these are quite large, which cats prefer. So we recommend about 1.5 times the length of the cat's body, or the cat's length from tip of the nose to the end of the tail is another good way to think about how long your litter box should be. Again, 1 per cat plus 1, keep them clean. So I recommend scooping twice a day. Studies have shown cats prefer clumping style litter. So that is what I recommend. And I don't recommend hiding your litter box, like boxes in the closets or cabinets. Those make it hard for cats to get in and out safely. They trap odor. And we know that when cats have covered litter boxes, the owner is much less likely to scoop them on a regular basis. So I don't recommend covered boxes. And again, you want to have different locations for that litter box, just like I showed you on my map. So the litter boxes should not be side by side. And you can kind of think of it as a difference between a public restroom that has stalls versus a public restroom that just has one toilet and a locked door. We feel differently about those two experiences, and you can kind of think about how your cat might experience having 2 or 3 litter boxes side by side. Yeah, you've provided the right number of litter boxes, but you haven't really changed the experience for your cat, again, if there's any tension or stress between your cats. And then finally, scratching posts, tall, sturdy. Most cats like sisal. Cats can be particular about whether or not they like horizontal or vertical scratching or angled scratching. So I always recommend trying a few different types of scratching options and see what your cat likes, or offer them choices. And, location is very important. So high traffic areas are actually usually pretty good places to have scratching posts, places where your cat naps, places where your cat eats, places where they greet you after work. Those are all times that they're likely to scratch, because they scratch for different reasons. They scratch to condition their claws, but they also scratch to stretch their back muscles, and also for behavior reasons. So it can be a displacement behavior. It can be a greeting behavior, and they also are marking their territory. So they do like those scratching posts to be in a nice prominent location. And when your cat scratches the scratching post, that's a great time to give them treats or praise. Okay, pillar 3, this one's one of my favorites, which is outlets for play and predation. And this is really all about play. And we start by picking the right toys. Cats are naturally hunters, so they all should have the capacity for play. And I encourage people to think about prey when they're choosing toys. There's actually been research that shows that some cats, when they're actually hunting, are specialists, meaning they pick one kind of prey and stick to it. So they might hunt only rodents, or they might hunt only birds. And then other cats are generalists. So they're going to hunt anything that kind of crosses their path. And you might see some of this in your own cat's play behavior, but I encourage having a variety of toys of each prey profile. So have a few different types of mice toys, have a few different types of bird toys. I've named a few of my favorite toys or brands of toys on this slide. But and the other thing is, again, the key word here is interactive. So an interactive toy is one that you're moving like prey. It's got a stick, it's got a string, it's got a little lure on the end. And so you're acting like prey, and your cat gets to be lost in that hunting experience, almost as if they were outside without the destruction to the small prey animals that they tend to like. Now, many people say, oh, my cat's bored of toys. He's bored of playing. He used to love to play. Now he just stares at me like I'm, not very interesting. And it turns out that science supports that cats do, in fact, get bored of their toys. And Dr. John Bradshaw, he is one of my favorite cat researchers in the world. He's written several great books on cats, and he's just an amazing all-around guy. He and Sarah Hall did this really cool study, over 20 years ago, that demonstrated that cats become habituated to the same toy. And habituation is just when you stop responding to a stimulus after repeated presentation. So that's kind of like, maybe when you hear a car horn outside your apartment, the first time you hear it, you're like, and then, 10 times later, you kind of have tuned it out. So cats stop getting excited about toys. So let me explain this study to you. Basically what they did was they presented house cats with a toy. The toy was a string with a little furry thing on the end. And they'd play with the cat with it for 5 minutes and record how many times that they clutched and bit the toy. And that's what this graph shows. So in session 1, on average, the cats kill bit the toy around 12 times, and they clutched it around 4 times. And then they'd wait. In this case, they did several permutations of this experiment. In this case, they waited 25 minutes between intervals. Session 2, they'd play this with the same toy and record how many times the cat bit and clutched the toy. Now you can see by session 3, the cat's barely interacting with the toy at all anymore. So the cat is already clearly bored of the toy. And so on session 4, what they did was they introduced a brand new toy to the cat. Now, the brand new toy was just like the first one. It was just a different color. So it's still a string with a little fuzzy puff on the end, but it was clearly a new toy. It was a different color, probably didn't smell like the cat anymore. And what we see is this rebound effect, where now the cat is playing with that toy almost as much as they played at the very start of the play session. So what we can take away from this is that your cat might get bored of the toy before they're done playing. And a lot of times people assume, oh, he's bored, he's done, so I'm just going to put the toy away. Play session's over. But if you had picked a different toy and brought that out, you might actually see that your cat will continue to play. And to be honest, when I play with my cats, I might pull out 4 or 5 toys in a 20-minute session, just to keep them engaged. And they do stay engaged. And sometimes it takes them a little while to warm up. Like the first toy, they weren't that into, but the third toy, they're like, yeah, this is great. So I definitely encourage have lots of different types of toys or have different lures for those interactive toys. Switch them out frequently, and don't stop playing right away just because your cat seems bored of one toy. Try a few toys before you assume that they are done playing. So some other tips for play, remember that, we're very visual, but for cats, hunting is not just visual. It's also about using their hearing, their sense of touch, which, their whiskers are very sensitive and they have all kinds of nerve endings all over their body that help them hunt. So be sure to use all of their senses. A lot of cats really love it when you like move a toy under some like tissue paper and make that crinkling, rustling noise, which is kind of like what a bird would sound like if they were rustling through some leaves. So really engage all of your cat senses. Think of the hunting sequence. So cats spend a lot of time stalking before they kill. So if you've never seen, there are videos of cats hunting online. I mean, it's a little gory, but really when we think about the hunting behaviors of cats, they're stalk and rush killers. So what that means is they spot the prey. They spend a lot of time waiting for that perfect moment to pounce. So they're going to do a lot of that watching and sneaking, and they're not running around like, little maniacs trying to get that mouse. They're really thinking about what's the best way to sneak up as close as possible to this prey animal. And then I'm going to jump on it and hopefully catch it. So you can reenact that with your own play, and don't get disappointed if your cat is doing a lot more staring than running around. Like that is a large part of play. It's very cognitive for cats. And be sure to act like prey. So think about like, what would a bird do? What would a mouse do? Where would I go if I was a bird? Where would I go if I was a mouse and I was scared of this cat? I already mentioned rotate toys. I do recommend cooling down the play, especially if you have a very hyperactive cat. So at the end of the play session, you can move the toy a little slowly and help the cat wind down. And if you have multiple cats, I do recommend separating them for play, especially if you have kind of a toy hog. My don'ts for play is don't make it too hard or too easy. So make sure your cat's having fun and occasionally catching the prey or the toy. Don't poke the cat with the toy. That sounds terrible, but when I worked in the animal shelter, we saw a lot of people that touched the cat with the toy, and I think they were just trying to get a reaction out of the cat, and usually it would get a reaction. It just wasn't a very positive one. So just remember that no mouse or bird is going to walk up to a cat and poke them. I don't recommend using your hands as a play item, so really direct their biting energy towards toys instead of body parts. Don't be lazy, like get out of your chair and move around the house and incorporate your cat trees and other stuff in your play so that your cat can really move around and take advantage of the space. And don't assume your older cat won't play. I mean, my last cat, Clarabelle, she was 16 and a half when she passed away, and she died of cancer, but she was playing until just a few days before she died. So don't assume that they will not play. Give them a try. It just might look different from a kitten. It'll look very different from a kitten. And a couple of years ago, I did this handout with Lily Chin on interactive cat play. The QR code is here if you want to take a quick shot, or you can come back to the recording of this later, or you can go to this link, whatyourcatwants.com. That's my blog /resources. And this handout is available freely as a PDF, translated into several languages, including Spanish, French, Chinese, Turkish, Portuguese, Dutch. I'm forgetting a few, but it's freely available. I encourage people to share it. Just don't modify it, but share it as is. Email it, post it, whatever. I just want people to have this information. I also love Lily Chin's illustration, so I want everyone to see this really cute handout. And the other thing, as Michelle mentioned, is next year I have a book. This is not the cover of my book, but I'm getting sick of waiting, so I made up my own cover. But it will come out in about a year, and it is going to be a deep dive into interactive play with your cat. And I'm really excited. Once the book comes out, I will be screaming it from the rooftops, and hopefully it will be exciting to all of you. Okay, pillar number 4, social interactions. And this is really like a big part of our cats' lives, especially because we primarily keep our cats indoors. For many cats, maybe we're the only living creature they interact with. But the human-cat relationship is really important to us. It's really important to our cats. And it can be a sticking point for a lot of people because if their cat isn't who they want or it doesn't do what they want, it can be very frustrating. It can require a lot of rethinking. And certainly if you've had one cat who was like very affectionate and cuddly, and now the cat you have now is not, that can be a huge adjustment for us as people. And so one thing I hear a lot is, how can I know if my cat's happy? It's a great question. And body language is a big way of reading our cats. There aren't a lot of great tools out there. As far as research is concerned, there's been a fair amount of studies using what's called the cat stress score. It's not a perfect tool, but it's one of the few we have, and it's not a bad tool. But really, what we can see is that, and if you Google cat stress score, you can find this little table that was used in multiple studies. But what we see is that basically a cat who's relaxed, I did like a photo adaptation. When cats are relaxed, we see they kind of spread out. They're laying on their side or on their backs. They're breathing slowly. Their body just seems loose. And you'll see, you know, they often look this way when they're resting or just sitting peacefully, and maybe their eyes are soft or blinking. And then as cats get more tense, we see this tightening. They get smaller. Now they're ventral, meaning they're upright on their stomach. Their tail is wrapped close into their body. Their body muscles are tight, and we don't see a lot of movement. And as we go from tense to terrified, we're going to see dilated pupils. We're going to see some vocalizations like hissing and growling that indicate this cat is in fight or flight mode. These cats are ready to protect themselves if they need to, but often they look this way because they don't feel safe. They're cornered and they don't have a lot of options. And so we want to avoid cats being in the terrified, or even, you know, as much as possible in the very tense category. But, you know, there are some good resources online on cat body language. I could give a whole talk, and maybe I will someday, on body language, so we could really take a deep dive into this. But this just kind of gives you a sense of what a relaxed cat looks like compared to a cat who's very unhappy and terrified. What's most important, I think, about interacting with cats is letting the cat call the shots. And this is very hard for people, you know, but it really is about giving the cat a sense of choice and control in how they interact with us, especially if you don't know them well, they don't know you well. Obviously, as you get to know your cat, you probably know what they do and don't like. But this study that Dennis Turner did showed that basically they had people go into the room with their cat, and half the people were instructed to just sit down on the floor and let the cat come to them, and the other half were instructed to interact with their cat. When the people just sat on the floor and let the cat come to them, those interactions were more positive and lasted longer than when the human made the first move. And if you've interacted with or observed maybe people who are allergic to cats who come over and the cats just love them, it's often because they're not immediately trying to pet a cat. You know, most cat lovers, you know, you meet a new cat, and you're like, oh my God, kitty, I love you. And you're like going over and you're getting in their face. And a person who's very allergic is going to be like, keep your distance, kitty. And then the cat is suddenly very interested in that person. And again, it's almost like they like it if you play a little hard to get. But I think what it really breaks down to is that the cat has the control here, and that's what they like. They're control freaks. We know from multiple studies that cats have preferred areas of the body to be petted. And those areas actually tend to be around the face. So the forehead and what we call the perioral area. So those are the cheeks and the little whisker pad area, the chin. And that makes sense. That's where they have a lot of scent glands. But there's been 2 studies now showing that when you look at a group of cats, overall, that is their favorite place to be petted. Their least favorite places to be petted are the base of the tail and the belly. And the rest of the body's like, you know, maybe not. And so, you know, when I bring this up, people are like, oh no, my cat loves belly rubs. And yeah, I've had cats who love belly rubs. So cats are individuals. And so when we do a study, what we're doing is we're looking at a group of cats, and we're congregating that, you know, we're aggregating that information to tell us what we know about most cats. It's not going to speak to every single cat out there. But as a rule of thumb, if you don't know a cat very well, you can feel relatively safe about approaching them in the perioral area and the forehead, but you should not go up to a cat you don't know and immediately start scratching the base of their tail, because most cats do not like that area. You should not immediately go up to them and rub their belly until you get to know what they like. And this has been shown in multiple studies. And also there's a great study that came out 2 years ago by Lauren Finke. Dr. Finke did a study where they basically gave people visiting an animal shelter guidelines on visiting the cats. So half the people got the guidelines and half the people did not. And then they recorded how their interactions with cats go. And these guidelines have a nice acronym. It's CAT, so we can all remember CAT. And the C stands for giving the cat choice and control, so not forcing interactions. The A stands for paying attention to the cat's body language and behavior, and in turn behaving accordingly. And T, thinking about where you are touching the cat. And the people who got the instructions in the study were given the same guidelines as far as like where cats like to be petted, so the green zones. where cats tend to not like to be petted, which are the red zones, and then the yellow zones, which are the intermediate. And the people who had the guidelines had better interactions with the cats, were much less likely to see any negative behaviors from the cats, like trying to bite or scratch. Now, you can ask your cat if you want to be petted. And I want to thank, J.R. Henderson from the Cognitive Cat. I took a class with him last year on cooperative care, which is a way of turning your cat or dog into an active participant in their medical care, so that they can consent to being touched or being examined, or getting their ear medication or eye medication. He's done some amazing work. There's a lot of people doing really great work with zoo animals, sanctuary animals, and now our companion animals. And so in this video, I'm going to just show you, this is because this is my cat Coriander. She's affectionate, very much on her terms. And she basically, I've worked out this thing with her where I ask her if she wants to be petted. And the way I ask her is I offer her my finger. And if she rubs into my finger, then I will pet her. And if she does not rub into my finger, I will not pet her. And she's figured out pretty quickly how to consent to, yes, I want to be petted. And so I filmed this the other day, so it's not the best video, but I think it's a pretty good illustration of how we do this little exercise. And you see she did not want to be petted. It's very interesting because every time she does not want to be petted, she does some displacement behaviors, and I have some thoughts about that, but not totally sure. But yeah, see, I offered the finger, she ignored it, so I withdrew my hand. And then when she makes eye contact, offer the finger, she rubs into it, she gets some scratches. And then I give her frequent breaks, and she's like, no, that was enough. And then she says, okay, you can try again. Yes, please. And then she says, no, one's good. So that's a way you can also learn whether or not your cat wants to be petted, is to basically teach them that, yes, if you do this behavior, I will pet you. And if you do not do this behavior, I will respect your wishes and not pet you. And then they can ask you for pets by rubbing into your hand. Okay. Pillar 5 is respecting the nose. Cats have an incredibly sensitive olfactory system, much more than ours. And they also use olfaction in ways that we don't. So they have those scent glands on their chin, their cheeks, their forehead, their tail. They have pheromones that they deposit in their urine and feces. And really, all of these things are things we can't smell, right? Like when your cat rubs on the corners of doorways or on your hand, we can't detect those. Those are really cat-specific signals. And the same is true of like urine marking. You've probably seen your cats like sniff things and they do a little open mouth grimace, and that's them detecting pheromones. So they really live in this olfactory world that we can't really understand, because that's what we call a secondary olfactory organ or system that they're using that communicates with other cats, like, hey, I was here, hey, I'm ready to mate, or hey, I'm stressed, or hey, I was here yesterday. And we know that cats who live together form a group scent, so they're rubbing on the same things and they're using the same litter boxes. And then they come to identify individuals in their group based on this group scent that they've created together. And so that's why when you bring a new cat into the house, or if your cat goes to the vet and comes back smelling like cleaning stuff, that the cats in the house are like, who's that? Or the cats can be very sensitive to new smells in the house. But aside from the ways that cats communicate with scent, I mean, we can certainly encourage them to deposit their scent on things by providing them with like those corner combers, and you can make your own with some brushes. Cat-It has this really nice spa with different textures that they can rub on. But we can also think about the cat's olfactory sensitivities in response to what we provide them for things to do. And cats are unique in that there are certain plants they really respond to. We know 50 to 60% of cats respond to catnip, and that is a genetic trait. So they either have it or they don't. And however, research has shown that more cats respond to a plant called silvervine. And hopefully most of you are familiar with silvervine. It's become more readily available in the United States and other parts of the world. It's also known as Japanese catnip or matatabi. It's a kiwi relative. And Sebastian Boll and some of his colleagues did a study showing that many more cats responded to silvervine than catnip. So similar response, it's kind of that euphoric rolling and rubbing and licking, which is, other research has shown it is related to the pleasure areas of the brain. So we believe that it is pleasurable, it's pleasant for cats. So it's a good experience, it's not bad for them, and they're not going to become addicted to catnip or anything. So you can, and if anything, they might stop reacting to it if you offer it too often. But you can also try Tatiana and honeysuckle or valerian. Those are other scented things that cats enjoy that, again, we don't really think about. We don't have the same kind of experience that they do, but for them, it's very enjoyable. So I always encourage people to take advantage of that and provide your cat with some olfactory things that they can enjoy. Okay, so to recap, we talked about the 5 pillars of a healthy feline environment. Again, remember there's safety, multiple and separated resources, play and predatory behavior, consistent social interactions, and respecting the nose. We covered a lot of territory there. And unfortunately, there's so much more I would talk about if we had time, but we don't, because I'm going to answer your question soon. But there are many other things that I could probably dedicate another hour to, all of these fun things like bird watching and catios and cat grass and cat fountains and fish tank for your cats and music for cats. So basically the sky's the limit, and there's lots out there. There's lots of fun things you could do. I really encourage people to think about like training or catios and harness walking, nose work games. Look that up. That's another way to use your cat's sense of smell for fun. And that's my catio. My cat's enjoying it. This is like right after we got it. So they were all like, oh man, what is this? They're very excited. But here's some ways to follow me on social media. And that's my blog, whatyourcatwants.com. And I do have a contact sheet on there. So if you want to reach out to me, there's a form on my website that you can go to. And I'm ready to answer questions.
Wow. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And we will send out the links tomorrow. If you want to unshare or leave it up for a little bit, but just so we can see you. But we will send this to everyone tomorrow, just with a lot of your recommendations as well. But we do have some questions, a lot of them. Let's see, but that was fantastic. I mean, just on behalf of all of our cats, I want to thank you, because you just gave us so many things to think about and act on. Okay, so how do you introduce cats from different colonies if they have to live in the same home?
Yeah, slowly. So we know, so it's very interesting. I mean, this is probably the number one reason I'm called for help at my behavior consulting service, is that people have introduced a new cat in the home and it's not going well. And it's very difficult, especially usually by the time I'm called in, the cats have had several fights. Maybe it's been months, not going well. The prognosis is not great. So we really try to prevent conflict as much as possible by introducing the cat slowly. So that means, putting the new cat in a separate room and maybe introducing just scent at first, so swapping bedding, and then maybe letting the cat see each other through a baby gate or screen, while having positive interactions on either side of that screen. So we're really taking several weeks in many cases. The tricky part is, as a scientist, I really tried to find out, what do we know about cat introductions and relationships? And the answer is almost nothing. There's been very little study of what works for cat introductions. And I can say from my own personal and professional experience that yes, some cats you could throw into a room together and they'll be fine. And the problem is we can't predict which ones will be fine. But many cats, you can also do everything absolutely correctly. You follow all the instructions you found online, you separated the cats and you gave them treats and you played with them and you did the baby gate, and they don't want to live with those other cats. And it gets back to that idea, I think, of control. If you had a friend who picked a new roommate for you, what are the chances you would like that person, right? You don't have any say. And it's really important to recognize that we're not giving our cats choice in this situation. We're making the decision for them. And I do think that some cats, I think many cats thrive off of having companionship of other cats. Many cats would love to be the only cat in the home. And that's a very hard thing for us, because most of us want more than one. I adopted 3 sisters together just because I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do an introduction. I'm just going to adopt a family. And that saved me some stress. But so I think it really is one of those things that you have to go slowly and be patient. I've had some introductions with clients I've worked with take a year to get those cats. And even 2 cats I had, it took about 10 months before they were able to be left alone together. So most cats you can get there if you have the space and the time and the patience. But it can be very stressful and difficult for people. So yeah, my main advice is go slowly.
Okay, oh, that's great. We have a question about, is there anything wrong or undesirable about hiding under the bed, if that's where your cat likes to hide?
I mean, I think it's good to have alternatives for your cat. Under the bed can be difficult if you need to evacuate with your cat. So for me, it's really about safety. It's not necessarily that space is bad. So I don't say like tear under the bed away from your cat until you found some alternatives that they like. And so I would just try some other things first. And then, some people I will recommend blocking under the bed if the cat is gravitated to some other areas, but some cats really want that space. And again, if you take it away from them, it can increase their stress rather than reduce it. So you kind of have to balance, like, maybe your cat goes under the bed, but you also start working on training them to come when you blow a whistle, so that if there is an emergency, you can get them to come to you, or you get them to go into their carrier on their own, so that you're prepared for that, inevitability if you have to evacuate your home quickly.
Great. How do I get my cat to use a scratching post when they prefer my furniture?
Yeah. So, it really, I would encourage you to look at what it is about the furniture that your cat likes. Is it the location? Is it the sturdiness, the size? Like, the sofa is very heavy. It doesn't jiggle when you scratch it. And I can't tell how many people I go to their house and it doesn't use a scratching post, and I like jiggle the scratching post. And yeah, that's not going to do it, because if you have a big cat and they're really pulling and stretching, then they are not, they're not going to be attracted to that. So thinking about what cats would scratch naturally outside: trees. They want something that weighs about 1 million pounds and is something they can dig their claws into. So it might mean you want to reupholster your couch or drape some unattractive fabric on it while you work on building and getting some really great scratching posts and putting them in very prominent locations, ideally near where your cat is scratching. A lot of times people are like, oh, I want the scratching post to be really far away from the couch because I don't want to encourage him to scratch the couch. But if your cat likes that location, then he likes that location, and you're going to be much more successful providing a scratching post nearby.
Okay, great. Can you speak to how cats feel if they're left alone at home without someone stopping by for feedings?
I don't recommend leaving your cat at your home alone for more than 24 hours without someone checking in. So yeah, I don't recommend leaving like a giant pile of food and hoping that your cat will be good for a long weekend. They won't. They have social needs. It's not just about the food and the water. It's about the routine and their social needs and safety. So yeah, I would not. Ideally, you have someone check on them once, if not twice a day while you're gone.
That's great. Do you free feed your cats? If so, how do you keep them from overeating and monitor for poor appetite and health problems? I saw also on your, I think your Instagram, about the scale, which I love. So
So it's a great question. I do not free feed my cats. I have 3 cats and they all have kind of different appetites. So I have these microchip feeders for 2 of them for their dry food, and they can, I measure out what they eat for all 3 of my cats. So I know exactly how much they're eating every day. One of my cats, she gets all of her dry food out of puzzles, and the other 2 get the dry food in their Sure Feeds, and they can eat it all when so I feed them dry food 4 times a day and wet food 2 times a day. I work from home. So, maybe they're a little spoiled, but so no, I'm very aware of how many calories they take, and I weigh them weekly. So they all were overweight on their first birthday, which was very shocking to me because I'd never had overweight cats in my life. My 2 previous cats had IBD, so they were underweight. So I was always weighing them to make sure they weren't losing weight. And now I'm weighing the cats to make sure they're not gaining too much weight. But weighing them weekly does allow you to kind of make, micro adjustments to how much you're feeding them, like how many grams a day. So I do recommend not using scoops, but actually weighing how much you feed your cats, because it's much more accurate than a scoop measure. Work with your veterinarian. Your veterinarian can tell you whether or not your cat needs to lose weight or is a healthy weight or needs to gain weight. But yeah, weighing them regularly. And certainly if your cat is having a hard time maintaining weight, then your vet should be involved, because they might need anti-nausea medication or appetite stimulants or something. Okay,
great. Okay, here's a good one. So many good ones, by the way. Yeah, I really hope you'll come back, because we have a lot more to ask you and for you to share. Okay, I have a question about laser pointers. How do you feel about laser pointers?
Everyone's picking the controversial topics.
I know.
Yeah, so I'm not anti-laser, but a laser pointer is like the lazy person toy, and also it's not that fun for your cat. So if you think about it, they can never catch it, and often people use it in ways that violate the laws of physics. So the laser goes up a wall and then it just vanishes. Like, that doesn't happen to a bug, right? So I encourage people, if your cat is really into laser, I mean, some cats, it really is the only way to get them kind of started and off their butts. So yeah, in moderation and in combination with a real toy. I'm not going to come over to your house and rip it out of your hands or anything, but we do see a small number of cats that might show more of that dog-like behavior where they become a little bit obsessed with the light. And so if your cat does that, they're probably not a good candidate for laser use. It hasn't been observed to the extent in dogs. So a lot of dogs get really obsessed with the laser light and it becomes kind of a compulsive disorder. To my knowledge, we don't see that level of problems in cats, but it's just, like I said, they can't touch it, they can't smell it, they can't taste it. It's not going to be as fun as a real toy.
And there are plenty of other great toys, right?
So
for
many
them
great
to
toys.
enjoy.
Yes.
Okay, my cat is affectionate in some rooms of the house, bedrooms, office upstairs, and distant in others. Can you talk about why that may be?
It could be that there's certain resources in those rooms where your cat feels more comfortable. So maybe they feel more comfortable on an elevated surface, or maybe you approach them differently when they're on an elevated surface than you do when they're on the floor. So it could be a combination of things. Maybe those rooms are warmer, or if you have other animals in the home, maybe that's just kind of where they've decided that they're most comfortable. And another exercise I do with the map, I went through my house and kind of how I have things laid out, but you can also do another level of that and map out where each cat in your house hangs out and kind of see what their individual territories are. And sometimes you can learn some things about, like, oh, these two cats don't get along, or these two cats are never in the same space. So there could be tension in the household too that affects your cat's behavior.
Okay, great. Back to toys. One of my cats, a 9-month-old kitten, loves dunking his toys in a water bowl and then brings the sopping wet toys into bed. Why is he doing this? Can we do anything to extinguish this behavior?
Ooh, yeah. Probably because it's fun is why they're doing it. Yeah, whether or not they have an instinct. I mean, cats are not known for like washing their foods like raccoons do. So I can't speak to whether or not this is, I mean, we do see that sometimes there are what we call ancestral behaviors that at some time in their evolutionary history made sense, but don't anymore. And a common one that we see is like cats who scratch around their food dish as if they're like maybe covering it for later, or protecting, like trying to hide the scent of the food. And in the home environment, that behavior doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's just retained. Like there's nothing like bad about it. It doesn't hurt cats in any ways to continue that behavior. But it doesn't necessarily make sense in the current environment. But yeah, sometimes we see that behavior more in like water loving breeds, like the hybrid breeds. So if your cat's a Bengal, that's a much more common behavior in Bengals, I think. But yeah, I don't have a great answer, unfortunately. Like I'm not a cat psychic, so I can never like ask like, why do you do these weird things? So we kind of assume it's either fun, it feels good, they get attention for it, or there's some kind of instinct that they're acting out. So sometimes we just don't know.
Okay. I have a cat who is both deaf and blind. How can I be sure if she's happy? I guess, yeah, anything for special needs, anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we see certainly we're seeing many more rescues of cats with special needs, which is great. A lot, in the past, I think a lot of those cats would have been considered unadoptable, and now there's people like doing amazing work rescuing them and providing them with really great environments. And so really just think about, I think for cats who are blind, like we're so visual that it's very hard for us to recognize that for cats, their sense of color is very different than ours. Their ability to see in low light is, very different from ours. But they rely very heavily on smell and their sense of hearing and their sense of touch. So you can take advantage of some of those things. I mean, blind and deaf cats can play with toys, they can climb things. They can be trained, and you just have to use, maybe instead of a clicker, you use a light, or you, make sure you use a vibration to let them know when you're approaching and that sort of thing. So most of those cats can use all the same kind of enrichment. If you're worried about your blind cat, say falling, like just make sure you have carpet under the areas that you have a cat tree, and maybe you don't have the like 10-foot tall cat tree, you have like a shorter one, but yeah, you can provide a lot of those same experiences for your cat, just keeping in mind that they might need some minor accommodations. But honestly, I've met blind cats that you would never have guessed they were blind. They could, jump up on the table and greet me and behave just like a sighted cat would. So, so don't, as far as can you tell they're happy, same way we tell with other cats, usually body language and behavior, and are they engaging in all those natural behaviors that we talked about at the beginning? So scratching and running around and, sleeping in the open, showing that loose body language, all of that stuff.
Okay, great. How do cats respond to your tone of voice? Are they affected by that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been some studies showing that like cats like recognize their name, and part of that's probably like the cadence we use when we talk to them. I do think, I mean, you'll meet a fair amount of cats, and so much of it probably depends on their socialization when they're kittens that are, more comfortable with women, But is that only because they were socialized with women, or, because women tend to be like, have a softer voice or a softer footfall? So there's lots of things. I mean, I do think that cats can pick up on some things about our tone of voice. I think most animals are more tuned to high-pitched sound. They don't tend to like sounds that sound like crying or screaming. That is kind of universal across species, that those are distress sounds, and that usually puts animals into an alarm mode. So speaking quietly and gently is probably always a better and a higher pitched voice. We know that animals pay attention to that. It's often referred to as like baby talk, or it used to be called motherese, but that's not just mothers that can raise their voices when they talk to babies, but that higher tone does tend to get animals' attention much more easily too, not just humans.
Okay. I have a cat that gets very upset by us humans moving too quickly or talking too loudly. He'll swat and meow loudly at us. How do we help him cope with this? Or he likes being the center of everything and cries if we put him in a room. So that's not an option.
Yeah, you might need to work with a behavior professional. I mean, there can be a few different approaches. One of them is when a cat is like scared or disturbed by something, we use something called desensitization and counter conditioning. So that's a common behavior modification technique where we're gradually increasing an animal's exposure to a stimulus while simultaneously presenting it with something that they like. So that might mean presenting them with noises at a lower level while they're getting treats or playing, and then we gradually increase the volume of that. So I have people do this when they're about to have a baby. I've download some audio of babies screaming and start at a low volume and play with your cat and give them treats, and then you start pumping up the volume so that when you have a real baby screaming, it's not very disturbing. Some cats are very sensitive to certain sounds, and there's actually a condition called feline audiogenic reflex seizures. So if your cat does have extreme reactions, including aggressive behaviors, specifically to sounds, I would talk to your veterinarian and make sure that there's not any type of medical issue. Some cats do need medication if they are very reactive to things in their environment, just for everybody's safety. So that's why in a case like this, I would need a lot more information and probably would refer you to either a veterinary behaviorist or your veterinarian to make sure that there's nothing medical that could be done to address it.
Okay, great. Okay, a few more questions. How do you feel about light mist spraying for behavior?
Thumbs down is how I feel about it.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, any advice on relocating the litter box?
Do it slowly. So usually what I recommend is put a second litter box where you want the current one to end up, and then start moving that first one closer and closer until it is next to the new location. Then you go to one, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Okay, and we're going to end on this one.
Okay.
What is the title of your book, which is forthcoming, but yeah.
It is called Play with Your Cat, and it will be out hopefully February 2024.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we look forward to it, and we hope you'll come back then, if not beforehand. Thank you so much. This was a fantastic presentation. We really appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with us. And thank you to Kimberly, our education coordinator, for helping to plan this event. And thank you all for joining us tonight. I think this was a really, really special event. So thank you again, Dr. Delgado, and everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.